Good morning. Leaving New York was the hardest thing I ever did. It was definitely a challenge for me. You know, growing up in New York, born in Harlem, raised in Yonkers / the Bronx, and it was everything. You know, I grew up. I was born in '75, and I grew up in the '80s and '90s, and it was the crack era, and I saw a lot of devastation to where I lived. I grew up in the projects, so you can only imagine how rough it was during that time period. But getting through my adolescence, once I got into my teenage years, that's when the fun began. You know, hip hop was really strong, and it was so influential. I loved every minute of it. You know, late '80s, early '90s, couldn't beat it. And I started partying in '93, and I got hooked. I was clubbing, and back then, all the hip hop acts were performing in the clubs. And we had clubs all over New York City. So you might have a club on 23rd Street, and Little Kim would be performing, and she might perform, let's say 12 o'clock. And then you go across the street to like a block over to 22nd Street, let's say the Cheetah Club or Club Ohm, for any of my New Yorkers that remember those clubs. You might have Busta Rhymes performing, you know, at midnight, 1 o'clock. It was incredible, those times. I had so much fun. And but once my daughter was born, I started looking at, you know, the landscape of how New York was. And when she was young, when she was a child, it wasn't too bad. You know, I was the one taking her to school and stuff like that. But once she got to the age where she wanted to go to school by herself, and I think she was in 3rd grade, and her school was in Manhattan, we lived in the Bronx, and I was like, you know what? Let's see how this goes. She thought she was by herself, but I followed her, and we was on the train, and she was sitting on the train by herself, and I just saw how people were acting, and there was a fight in the car, in the train, and you know, she looked scared, but she was able to control herself, her emotions. But that just showed me, like, nah, this ain't gonna work. So once she got to 7th grade, going into 8th, we decided to move to Savannah, Georgia, and she grew up there basically, and that's probably the best thing that ever happened to her. It happened to me as well, you know, because New York at that time, the gangs were prominent, especially for the girls. The girls, you know, I don't know, it seemed like the girls were worse than the boys. It's like they had something to prove, and they were vicious. You know, I saw girls getting slashed and stabbed and all that stuff, and I'm like, no way. You know, so getting my daughter up out of there was imperative. But to be honest, I miss it. I miss New York. I always will. I haven't been to New York since 2014, and I don't know what to say. To be honest, it's just when you're born and raised there. No lighter. Yeah, when you're born and raised in a certain place, any place, you know, you get complacent, you get comfortable. You don't see yourself leaving unless you're having a hard time. Either you can't find a job, You don't have any friends, you're lonely. It's just a bad environment. You know, you have a bad family life and you want to get away. Your safety's at risk, etc., etc. So I understand why people stay where they are and they never leave. I thought I was going to be one of those people. I love New York. I just love the diversity. I love the different cultures, the different foods. Of course, I love the hip hop community. It was just everything. Beautiful. But once I left, you know, I realized there's a whole nother world out there. There's a whole nother world out there. It's a different way of living in Savannah, Georgia, I'll tell you that. You know, but they have a different mindset, very slow. I mean, everything about Savannah is slow. Everything, you know, but some very nice people out there, very nice people. You know, there's nice people in New York too, but for the most part, that Southern hospitality is real. Especially where I lived in Savannah. I'll tell you now, I remember my first wake-up call. I was there maybe about a week, and I was looking for the DMV. And I asked the lady, I pulled up next to her, and I said, you know what a DMV is? And she goes, yeah, follow me. I was like, follow you? She made a U-turn. We drove about a mile. She pulled over. She said, it's right there. I said, thank you. So being from New York, when somebody helps you, you always like, all right, what they want was, you know, you're expecting something. So I expected when I came out to the DMV for her to be out there waiting for something, expecting $1 or something. But nope, she was going. And it's that type of hospitality. Well, I know when I lived there, that's how it was. The neighbors were friendly. Everybody was, you know, but of course it depends where you live. I lived in a predominantly white area in Savannah. They called it Whitmarsh Island, which is near Tybee Island. So it wasn't, Savannah's pretty small. So I was only about 10, 15 minutes from downtown. But where I lived was predominantly white. And I remember when I met a few black people out there, because you are going to meet black people, because there's nothing but black and white out there in Savannah. And they were like, their mentality was so old school. Like, why you live out there? You know, they don't want us out there. That just didn't make any sense to me. You know, like, I was like, yo, I grew up in the hood. You know, why would I move and live in the hood? You know, I want to live where I feel safe, where my daughter's safe, my belongings are safe. You know, so it's funny because one of the people that was asking me why I live where I live, her car was broken into 3 times. Her house was broken into once. Her daughter used to get into fights. I don't want to live that life. You know, so that's funny to me, but that's the mentality they had out there. Like that real 1950s mentality. It's like, it's just ridiculous. And then I lived there for 5 years, then I moved to California. So I'm gonna tell you this, sometimes you gotta take a chance, you gotta take a risk. You know, don't be complacent in where you are, no matter if it's where you live, your job, your education. You know, if it's time for change, it's time for change. And I know for me, as of right now, I'm looking at change. You know, I don't think California, well, this part of California is for me. You know, I definitely need to make more money, and so I need to figure some things out. But while I do that, I'm gonna make the best of it. But it's been about 10 minutes. And I appreciate anybody that stayed along for this ride. Thank you for your support. Please like and subscribe. Stay blessed.